right, well, thanks for the kind introduction, Jim, and good morning, everyone. As I was walking over, I was thinking it's hard to believe we've been doing this for 18 years in terms of sponsoring these events, and with the upcoming programs, we're excited, and I'll echo Jim's thoughts, to be back in person, seeing everybody again, and looking forward to fruitful discussions. And we are proud of our long-standing relationship with the Chamber as well, and look forward to many more years of discussion. On behalf of the Chamber and Bank of America, I'm honored to introduce today's guest, Speaker of the Massachusetts House of Representatives, Ronald Mariano. Speaker Mariano has represented the 3rd Norfolk District in the Massachusetts House of Representatives since 1991. He was elected Speaker of the House in December of 2020, after serving as Majority Leader for 9 years. As Speaker, he's continuing to bolster the state's COVID-19 pandemic response and position Massachusetts for sustainable, long-term economic recovery. Speaker Mariano has worked to solidify Massachusetts as a leader in offshore wind, promoting energy solutions, jobs, and economic development. Throughout his career, Speaker Mariano has been a driving force behind groundbreaking legislation related to criminal justice, guns, and education. Speaker Mariano has been a champion for a permanent Massachusetts film tax credit and for accessible health care for all in the Commonwealth, particularly in the preservation of our community hospitals. We're thrilled to have you with us today, Speaker, and without further ado, I'd like to welcome you to the stage.
Good morning. Is it still morning? Welcome to my brunch. I want to thank Jim Rooney for scheduling this right in the height of sinus season. So if my voice sounds a little gravelly today, it's because I'm fighting the changes in temperature. But really, I am happy to be here today, and I want to thank the Chamber for allowing me this opportunity to speak. It is something I sort of look forward to with some trepidation, but I'm happy to be here today. But before I begin, I'd like to recognize again the folks that help me accomplish whatever I am going to accomplish in the House. And that's the team that's sitting at that table, beginning with Kate Hogan, Aaron Mikowitz, Mike Moran, Alice Pice, Jeff Roy, Jerry Paracella, and Josh Cutler. These are the folks. These are the folks that allow me to dabble in the different areas of expertise that I'm interested in, and they were just sort of elaborated in the introduction, but they are things that I am concerned with and will continue to work on. Last year, I addressed the Chamber as the new House Speaker under very, very different circumstances. In March of 2021, the Commonwealth was still reeling from a year-long battle with COVID-19. Daily deaths and hospitalizations were high. Businesses were struggling amid seemingly indefinite closures. And I had to do this speech from my office away from all of you, which was not all that bad. But now we're here together in person, which may be a good thing for some and not so good for others. Our vaccination efforts have made the pandemic more manageable, and businesses, along with the rest of the world, are beginning to adjust to the new normal. Getting to this point has taken the collective action and sacrifice of so many of our healthcare workers, our public safety officials, teachers, store clerks, and all our essential workers. The legislature has done its part by providing pandemic relief and historic one-time investments in everything from economic development initiatives and affordable housing to public health, education, and climate preparedness. Our American Rescue Plan package included $500 million in premium pay bonuses for essential workers, hundreds of millions in affordable housing and home ownership assistance, and significant funding that expanded access to broadband and supported small businesses. This is the point where I'd like to thank Chairman Aaron Michaelwitz and the House Ways and Means Committee. His leadership and guidance really has ensured that the public input plays a vital role in shaping any of our spending packages. Those of you who remember the struggles at the beginning of the ARPA know that we wanted to have public hearings. The governor disagreed. The House and the Senate really forced the issue on the public hearings. We got to have our public hearings, and we think we created a better package because of those public hearings. We've come a long way since the beginning of this pandemic, and I'm optimistic about the direction in which the Commonwealth is headed. I'm confident that here in Massachusetts, public officials, business leaders, and everyday residents can come together and get things done. We must use the same spirit of collaboration and shared purpose that got us through the worst of the pandemic to address the challenges that lie ahead. The sense of collaboration in politics at the national level has vanished. In recent years, we've seen just how divisive politics can be, and how common sense solutions can oftentimes get lost in the ever-increasing partisan divide. All we have to do is look at gun control issues nationally to see examples of that. But our civic challenges are greater than just partisan division. Increasingly, people with different points of view are often occupying different realities. That's why in Massachusetts, we worked very, very hard to do things differently. Senate President Spilka has been an outstanding partner on many of the issues that we've tackled. And Governor Baker's good faith efforts at compromise and collaboration have allowed for a strong working relationship that has delivered tangible results for the Commonwealth. It is my belief that results should be measured by their impact on people and not by message, especially messages that just play well in the press. Those kinds of results are hard-fought, take time, and require a certain tolerance for frustration. I've often stressed the importance of never letting perfection be the enemy of the good. Those of you in this room who have worked with us on Beacon Hill know that politics, more than anything, is the state of the art of what's possible. During my time in the House, I've seen too many good pieces of legislation fail because of a willingness to abandon any progress when one side didn't get exactly what they sought. Since my inauguration, my goal as Speaker has been to facilitate discussions that get us past entrenched positions and towards workable legislation that can be signed into law and stand the test of time. We do that by listening to constituents, advocates, and outside experts, such as members of the business community. We seek your input, and at times we must call on you to help lead societal change. That's why events like this are so critical. The business community is crucial to our ability to address many of the biggest issues facing the Commonwealth. Massachusetts has a proud history of the public and private sectors working together to innovate and to solve the most pressing issues facing not just the nation, but the world. Perhaps the greatest collective challenge of our time is the destructive potential of our changing climate. In the threat of climate change lie opportunities amid this, such as the untapped potential of the offshore wind industry. By embracing offshore wind here in Massachusetts, we can achieve greater energy independence and significantly reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, all while providing thousands of good-paying jobs in the process. Offshore wind isn't just good for the climate, it's good for business. Our region has some of the highest energy costs in the nation. The high costs you pay for your electric utility, especially during the winter months, stem from the fact that about half of our electrical supply is generated by natural gas. And if the war in the Ukraine has not made it clear to everyone, being over-reliant on one source of energy leaves us vulnerable to a turbulent global energy market. Offshore wind will green the grid while insulating ratepayers from spikes in the natural gas market. If I may take a moment of executive privilege here, which I don't think anyone's going to challenge it, so I know there's a lot of folks rushing to take credit for offshore wind, and the one thing I'd like to say is that the House recognized the benefits of offshore wind very early on, and I think we have been rewarded. I think the latest bid that's going to be announced today or over the next couple of days is down to 7.2 cents a kilowatt hour. When we first started to look at the cost of the offshore wind per kilowatt hour, the estimates were at 15 and 16 cents. And when we did our first stripped down offering, it came in at 9. But now it's at 7.2. Trending in the right direction, folks. We think we've struck on something that is going to be a significant player in the move to climate change, in the move to stabilize our electrical needs going forward. And here in Massachusetts, our commitment to further developing offshore wind has already attracted promising projects by members of this chamber. Vineyard Wind and Mayflower Wind, I believe, are both members. However, if Massachusetts is going to live up to its true energy production potential, our state government must do its part to ensure that our market is competitive. We've done this before with the life sciences industry. That's why earlier this year, the House, guided by the leadership of Jeff Roy, and I'm going to just take a pause here and say, I put Jeff Roy in a really difficult position when I got appointed in December. I took him out of healthcare, where he had immersed himself in the healthcare laws, and told him he was going to lead the charge for offshore wind. And I have never seen anyone get up to speed as fast as he has on the rigs and intricacies of both the electrical grid system and the offshore wind system. So he deserves an awful lot of thanks. But you know what I found out in this business? No one's born knowing all this stuff. Jeff wasn't born knowing all about offshore wind. He's had to throw himself into it and learn it and spend time. And he's done that, and he spent the time. But he passed comprehensive legislation designed to increase offshore wind development and modernization. Well, we're also modernizing our transmission and distribution systems to accommodate the future growth, not just in wind, but in all renewable energies. If we moved all the way to renewable energies today, we couldn't connect them all to the grid. So we need to do a balanced approach while fixing the transmission, fixing the grid. Here I go, I'm going to lose it now. While at the same time supporting and creating the infrastructure for offshore wind. We invested $750 million over the next decade in our port infrastructure. Extremely important. The commitment that we're making to Salem will be transformative. We have money for innovation, job training. We want to increase the supply chain capacity, and we want incentives to incubate world-class companies. Companies like Prysmian Group, a fine Italian company, by the way, which is set to occupy the site of the former coal-fired power plant in Somerset. This is a Tier 1 manufacturer that is setting up shop right here in Massachusetts to produce the cables that will deliver energy generated off the coast of Martha's Vineyard to Massachusetts homes and businesses. This company and the hundreds of workers it will employ will supply the transmission cables not just for Massachusetts, but potentially for projects up and down the East Coast, placing a vital hub of the regional supply chain right here in Massachusetts. As our legislative negotiations continue, we will not lose sight of the generational opportunity that we have to build a new industry from the ground up, and we cannot waste it. As part of that offshore wind bill, the House developed a program designed to supply the workers we need for this emerging industry. A little quick aside, Jeff and I were on a boat ride out looking at windmills, which is, if you know the legislature, that's sort of an average day. And the windmills had been shut down for maintenance, and we were looking at these guys who repelled down the blades of windmills. And if you've never seen that, you really should take a look at it. And I just looked at Jeff and I said, I'm confident we can build these turbines and we can build these windmills, but we're going to get guys to do that. He went down there with two guide wires, and we talked to the guy who ran the windmill, and he said, there's plenty of these guys. He says they're danger nuts. They love it. And so we're confident we'll have enough guys to maintain the windmills. You know, the financial incentives that we've put in also to our school system to develop curriculums that result in students obtaining industry-recognized credentials that get them hired, that get them paid. We'd also require the Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development to annually create a list of highly skilled, high-wage, and high-demand jobs in the Commonwealth, which the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed will make available to all school districts. This is the type of program I spoke about last year when I spoke about skills credentialing. The House has dedicated tens of millions of dollars in new investments for a myriad of workforce programs, such as training at community colleges, and it's why the House's most recent budget included significant funding for adult education and early college programming. Younger generations are increasingly likely to build their wealth through their technological acumen rather than traditional paths. Therefore, it's incumbent upon us to recognize that as the modern workforce matures and we continue to see new products and industries emerge, we must build the needed workforce for these industries and cultivate a welcoming environment that incubates innovation and rewards those who are willing to take smart risks. Building a workforce is our responsibility, but we also have a basic obligation to not actively thwart the creation of new jobs in developing industries. In Massachusetts, our residents drive across borders to place legal bets on sporting events in an app developed in Massachusetts and run by a highly skilled Massachusetts company. And if we had it, I probably wouldn't be here today because I would have laid it all on the Celts last night. And Rooney'd be looking for a new speaker. But we can't bet. Not yet. Last July, the House again passed legislation for Jerry, second or third time, authorizing sports wagering and bringing that revenue to benefit Massachusetts residents. I'd like to thank Jerry Paracello for his hard work, and I mean hard work. And I know he's going to continue to lead on this issue going forward. The House bill would legalize professional and collegiate sports betting and bring in $60 million of annual tax revenue, in addition to collecting up to $70 to $80 million in licensing fees that must be renewed every 5 years. This is revenue that could then be used to bolster workforce and youth development, public health initiatives, and his aid to our cities and towns. I've been around long enough to know, long time, that good fiscal times don't last, and that we can't always expect strong revenue returns or more aid from the federal government. That's why it's absolutely critical for the legislature to continue to look for new smart ways to generate more revenue for the Commonwealth. Revenue that can be reinvested to spur the economic development. The reality is, legalizing sports betting wouldn't just bring vital revenue to the Commonwealth, it would also create jobs. Located in Boston's Back Bay, DraftKings employs well over 1,000 residents of the Commonwealth, and it continues to grow. Following the 2018 Supreme Court decision, over 300 states have legalized sports gambling, including gambling on collegiate sports. In the vast majority of cases, they have fully embraced this new industry and the economic benefits they bring to their residents. According to DraftKings, 35% of all Celtics playoff bets, which could have been me, were made in New Hampshire from Massachusetts residents, by Massachusetts residents. A similar trend could be seen during the collegiate playoffs, March Madness, with 28% of bets in New Hampshire coming from residents of the Commonwealth. You know, that's why I've consistently advocated for the legalization of both professional and collegiate sports betting. And it's why the House legislation passed last year does just that. If the legislature only acts to legalize gaming on professional sports, we will be leaving a significant portion of the industry in the hands of the black market. It was only a few years ago that a similar debate around the legalization of recreational marijuana ended with voters choosing to approve the measure. From 2019 to 2020, Massachusetts saw a steady migration of folks from the black market of marijuana towards the legal cannabis market. As we continue to see that trend increase and having recently reached $3 billion in gross revenue, we can apply the same lessons learned to collegiate sports betting. The goals are essentially the same. Bring a market that already exists and is here to stay onto the books, and end the black market, and generate revenue for important state investments. I sat on the conference committee that was responsible for writing the legislative framework that has since guided the cannabis industry here in the Commonwealth. That was a task. Since the ballot question that was approved had very little details. And while we have seen significant economic benefits since then, most notably in the form of significant tax revenue, equity within the industry has remained elusive. A primary focus of our original legislative efforts was to ensure that those who have been historically impacted by marijuana prohibition can find new opportunity in this emerging industry. But the intent has not been realized. That's why last week we passed legislation designed to support minority-owned marijuana businesses. The House cannabis legislation takes a portion of tax revenue collected from the cannabis industry in Massachusetts, about $28 million last year, and makes that money available through a social equity fund to support folks who have faced generations of inequality, helping them secure needed capital to launch their businesses. We only expect the number to rise as more and more businesses get off the ground. We are excited about the potential that the cannabis industry has to provide unprecedented opportunity for communities of color, while also stimulating the economy and generating a new wave of entrepreneurs. I also believe that industries related to cannabis should be excited about the prospect for growth here in Massachusetts. I urge those of you in this room to look for mutually beneficial opportunities to support this burgeoning industry. It's been my goal as Speaker to support new industries that have the potential to thrive here in Massachusetts, and there can be new sources of revenue for the Commonwealth. To do that without supporting equitable growth, however, is irresponsible, and something that we are addressing with this legislation. On all legislation related to emerging industries, I look forward to working with the Senate, and the Senate President, and the Governor on different ways to cultivate lasting economic growth that benefits all residents of the Commonwealth. I've long believed that some of the most important local economic engines spread through the Commonwealth are our community hospitals. It's been at the forefront of Massachusetts healthcare policy since working in the landmark healthcare reform law of 2006. That's hardly a memory. I've seen firsthand the devastating impact that losing a hospital can have on a community when my home city of Quincy lost Quincy Medical Center in 2014 due to the financial struggles of a community hospital. Community hospitals not only provide quality, affordable care, they also employ hundreds of workers from the community, and most of them are located in gateway cities. That's why, as House Speaker, I've been leading the effort to establish more robust protections for community hospitals. Unfortunately, the story of Quincy Medical Center is not unique, as community hospitals across the Commonwealth are grappling with how to deal with larger hospital systems expanding into their service areas and subsequently siphoning off many of their privately insured patients. Last year, the House passed legislation to promote a more balanced healthcare market by strengthening the regulatory process for healthcare expansions. The legislation establishes a more rigorous review to ensure that when large hospital systems expand, they're not infringing on community hospital markets. As larger hospital systems expand, they attract more privately insured patients, allowing them to command more leverage when they negotiate for their rates with insurance companies. At the same time, vulnerable community hospitals lose these patients. They lose the leverage and begin a downward spiral that oftentimes cannot be reversed. For many of our most vulnerable residents, community hospitals are the only option for affordable care, meaning that when a community hospital is put at risk, working families lose access to care and health care costs rise in the Commonwealth. Without legislation that gives the Health Policy Commission and the Attorney General the authority to review hospital expansions, it's only a matter of time before an expansion takes place that puts other community hospitals out of business. If we want to guarantee access to affordable treatment for all residents of Massachusetts, community hospitals must be protected. If Massachusetts is serious about controlling health care spending for the protection of our residents, this bill is a no-brainer. As many of you know, the economic fallout of the pandemic has been significant and widespread. Workforce shortages continue to impact almost every sector of the economy, especially the early education and care workforce. We know that a robust early education and care system is essential in helping parents, especially women, return to the workforce. For the House, though, it's also about preparing the next generation of the Commonwealth's leaders. Together, we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to foster a transformative change in how we support those who support our youngest children, Massachusetts working parents, and the economy as a whole. The EEC Economic Review Commission, led by Chairman Alice Peisch, who did another outstanding job on a very difficult issue, had brought forth a number of recommendations to strengthen support for the early childhood care industry and its ever-essential workforce. That report conclusively found that Massachusetts consistently ranks as one of the least affordable states for early education and care. All of us here today have the power to help change that. I want to recognize the folks in this room who have recently coalesced around the importance of early education and care. I know the Chamber's involvement predated much of today's fashionable interest. People like Jim Rooney, Bob Rivers of Eastern Bank, and J.D. Chesloff. I saw him working in. There he is. Yeah. Another product of the House. All of whom have recognized the seriousness of this issue for some time. In the Massachusetts Business Roundtable's work on a joint report in 2016 between the House and the business community that identified EEC as a key workforce pipeline issue. Fast forward 6 years and one global pandemic later, every business group in the Commonwealth is calling for more robust support for early education programming, and while there are one-off anecdotal examples of businesses stepping up to the plate and investing in child care resources for their employees, we need these same businesses to help us create long-term universal solutions, whether it's through employer contributions, revenue updates, or benefit plans. You know, one of the things that I enjoy about getting out and talking to people is I listen to complaints, and some of them I can do something about, some of them I can't. But one of the universal complaints since the pandemic has been, I can't find any people. I can't hire. We don't have any people coming in. And it's real. And it isn't just low-end jobs. It's accountants. It's administrative assistants. It's talented people aren't coming back into the workforce. And we've recognized that. And since 2016, the House has led the way in increasing wages in the early educator workforce. Most recently, the FY23 House budget provided $60 million to support salaries for the Commonwealth's early childhood workforce, which was targeted to those programs serving our most vulnerable families. We also proposed $10 million to support child care slots for early educators themselves, so we could have people go to school to become trained to take care of children while their children were taken care of at home. Well, this represents a very significant down payment towards the future of early education. We know there's still a lot more work to be done. I believe that over the next decade, we must pursue a societal shift in how we create a system to care for and educate our youngest residents. The future of our Commonwealth and our nation really depends on it. The reality is state government cannot fight these issues by themselves. While we know our congressional delegation is fighting hard for us on this important issue, the Commonwealth, business leaders, and leaders on Beacon Hill have never shied away from taking action on what we believe in, regardless of whether we receive federal assistance. With the help of our partners on the national level, we hope to significantly extend state-subsidized child care to more working families in the Commonwealth by expanding the current income eligibility threshold. This is a cost-intensive goal, which will require investment from federal, state, and municipal governments over multiple legislative sessions. I think the price tag that Alice's committee came out with was $1.5 billion. But in a recent report, the Mass Taxpayers Foundation estimates that inadequate child care results in additional costs and lower productivity for employers, as well as less tax revenue for the Commonwealth. Businesses in Massachusetts lose roughly $2.7 billion each year in earnings because of inadequate child care for children under 5 years old. That's from the Chamber. Groups ranging from the Chamber to Mass Taxpayers to our long-trusted partners in the advocacy spaces have put out a clarion call for increased child care to supports in an effort to help their workers return to the office. Take the estimate from Mass Taxpayers, which states that 35,000 parents with children under 5 left the workforce during the pandemic, to the tune of about $563 million, give or take a few mil, a year for local businesses in extra rehiring and retraining expenses. The data is pretty definitive. The time is now for business leaders to join with the legislature and help solve this issue once and for all. Today, as recommended by the EEC Economic Review Commission, I'm calling on businesses across the Commonwealth to come together and present the House with a proposal for debate in the next legislative session that would require companies of a certain size to provide child care resources to your employees. However, we know this isn't a complete fix, and that more extensive solutions to the child care crisis of the working families are facing will be necessary. The House has time and time again shown its commitment to supporting the EEC workforce as an essential system that underpins our economy. The pandemic was a wake-up call, and we look forward to receiving the Chamber's feedback sometime this fall so we can all codify solutions into law next session. It's no coincidence that America's most competitive period in history coincides with the rise of universal K-12 education. We are proudly the first nation to have pioneered universal schooling. Now, Massachusetts, the home of Horace Mann and the Petri dish for great educational experiments, must take the next step. We can and must create an equitable and affordable child care system that prioritizes quality and bolsters the economic engines that power the Commonwealth. The next generation of leaders deserve nothing less. When I spoke to you all last year, I ended my speech by emphasizing the importance of continued collaboration between state government and the Commonwealth's business community. Many of the goals that I outlined this morning and many of the goals that you all have for your businesses will struggle to come to fruition if the public and private sectors work against each other and rather than with each other. This doesn't mean that we are always going to agree, but it does mean that our mutual success and the success of the Commonwealth hinges on our ability to converse with an open mind. That's really why I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here. And I'd like to thank again Jim Rooney and the whole Greater Boston Chamber for the invitation to speak with you today. And I'm also grateful for the critical work that each of you do and look forward to a continued collaboration. So with that, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for especially for hitting on so many issues on the minds of leaders in the business community, women in the workforce, early childhood education, the House's leadership on climate change and offshore wind, and of course, you know, we do think about sports betting, and I know this would never happen in Quincy, but I might have been able to get that bet in for you in Southie.
I should have called you.
But if I may, you know, so many of the issues that you talked about and others depend on cooperation between the state, the business community, and local communities. When I think about housing and the ability to expand our housing inventory, when you think about all the ambitious goals that you and the state has for climate change, and you mentioned the need to increase the size of the grid and cite some facilities, and you think about electric vehicle charging and so forth, all of those have to go in local communities. How does that affect our strategy in dealing with local communities to accept things like additional housing and things like, you know, electrical infrastructure that is quite necessary to achieve all these goals?
It's a great question, because all the communities are run so significantly different. But I think the general need is recognized, especially around the energy production stuff. And I think you see in the House and Senate right now a two-pronged attack on this issue, and it's something that Chairman Roy is dealing with daily now as he tries to compromise a bill. Our bill is very pro-offshore wind. I'm trying to be delicate. And the Senate bill is very pro-electrification of everything. They want electric cars, they want charging stations. I think what has to happen is a synthesis of the two as a statewide priority that we can go out and sell to the communities, both as an electrical change in the way we drive and how we deal with fossil fuels, and the building of an infrastructure for offshore wind. I think we see with the decline of the cost in offshore wind that we're on the right track. We need to continue the commitment, and I think at some point the two are going to merge.
Any questions out there? I have a whole list here that I can go through, but questions from the audience?
Except Dempsey can't ask any. Last time the governor was here, he singled you out. Said he wouldn't have to talk to me about health care, he'd just go to you.
Well, you know that I can't let you go without asking you a transportation and T question. You know, as we sit here in Greater Boston, you know, certainly the traffic is back, the downtown garages are full, but the T is the ridership is down. Certainly performance issues, lots of things going on with our public transportation system. You know, what's your assessment of, you know, where we've been and where we need to go? I know, you know, you lead a T community. You know, what's your assessment of where we need to go?
Well, I think the T has been a problem. Let's see, I've been up there 30 years, so this T's been a problem 31 years.
That was when I left.
Yeah, well, yeah, good. I worked that out. I didn't do that on purpose either. Now, listen, I come from a community that watched the T shut down the biggest parking garage in the center of my city because they didn't do any maintenance from the time they built it till the time it was condemned. Those are the inherent problems that I've been dealing with at the T. The red line that shut down on the first snowstorm that we had of more than 3 inches in 5 years ago or whatever it was. So I'm no stranger to the problems of the T. But I do think that some of the things that we're doing have been making it more efficient. We have put more money into cars. I don't know if we'll ever get that right, purchasing cars and getting them to run as soon as they get delivered. But there's things we have to work on. There's a commitment to being more diligent in the maintenance, which I think is extremely important. How do you tear down a parking garage because of the wear and tear? The thing doesn't do anything except sit there. So, I mean, it's been a real conundrum of things that I can't figure out, and mismanagement and missteps. But I do think the new director who has made a commitment for getting repairs done as quickly and efficiently as possible. He did a Quincy T station, redid the whole thing, made it handicap accessible in under a year. Those are the type of things that we need to see happen. Aggressive attacks on the infrastructure. The more of those we see, the more efficient the T becomes, and the hope then is that more people begin to ride it. I am concerned, though, that you're absolutely right. There are more cars on the road now than ever, and the T ridership is still lagging way behind. So that is a real problem.
One final question, Mr. Speaker. You mentioned sports betting, of course, is on the agenda. You and your team has a busy July in front of them. Looking into your sort of crystal ball of the next 60 days or so, you know, how do you see things playing out in the month of July with some of the bills that are pending?
If I had a crystal ball, I would have laid all that money on the shelf last night. Look at. The challenge is and always will be, as we approach the deadline, anyone who's been involved with the legislature knows that we operate best up against deadlines because it forces people to take a realistic view of their position. And my hope is that the conference committees that we have going that are very, very important to me personally and to the House as their priorities, and that's the offshore wind and the gaming piece. We can resolve those conference committee issues, let's say before July 31st, and begin to start to tackle some other things that we have that might be a little bit less confrontational. We have a lot of things in the pipeline that we can do that won't rise to the level of these bills, but the ones that we do have, and we have a mental health bill coming that we think will need to go to conference. So there will be a lot of back and forth as we go into June and July, but my hope is that we can, like I was very lucky to do my first December, we got everything done. In a month we came in and it was like, let's make a deal. And we were able to get everything done. And my hope is that same spirit of collaboration will resurface. So.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure I'll be on your phone over the next couple of months.
You will too.
I want to thank you for including in your remarks the gratitude to the Chamber and other organizations, the Roundtable Taxpayers Foundation, and the business community for the work on child care and other issues. Each of the leaders of those organizations and myself have adopted a similar theme to what you expressed of collaboration between the business community and our government leaders. We know that the days of what are they going to do about it in government are long gone, and the business community has to sort of step up and show its leadership as well. So thank you for recognizing that, and thank you for extending that hand of cooperation to all of us. And once again, thank you for making the time for being with us today.
Thank you.
Good.